Hello everyone, and welcome to the Customer Experience Model, or as we'll get to know it today, the Knowledge-Centered Service Model presentation. This presentation really highlights the history of Knowledge-Centered Service, KCS, where it comes from, and why it's become the industry best practice on how to use, create, reuse, and share knowledge within the support industry. But I also think it's a great model. It really highlights how KCS can be central to our success around services transformation. So let's make a start. If we look at things from the customer's perspective, customers don't have incidents. Customers have issues with our software. So let's turn these issues into exceptions. So an exception can be any issue a customer has had with our software that's prevented them from being productive. This doesn't necessarily mean it's just a defect or an error. It's anything that gets in the way of the customer being able to use our software. So it could be an error, it could be a defect, but it could also be a configuration problem. It may even be a lack of knowledge on their part. These are all types of exceptions that our customers may have. Now let's step back 25 years before there was knowledge management in the support industry. Everyone was really set up the same way to receive these exceptions into support from customers. And the setup was called what we now know as the funnel. Customers were funneled through levels of support. So at the front we had the level 1 teams that were perhaps the more junior, more generalist analysts that try and solve the problem. And if not, then they would forward it to the level 2s and the level 3s, and the level 3s were the more senior, more specialised, and eventually what fell out of the bottom of the funnel ended up with engineering or development. Ideally though, these were only the actual platform defects that development needed to be able to fix. This was the only way that customers at the time could contact support or receive support, and what was uncovered was that there was about an 80% success rate at each level. So if 10,000 exceptions came into the funnel at level 1, about 80% of those would get solved there, meaning that 20% would move on to level 2. Again, they would solve about 80%, resulting in the remaining 400 cases falling into level 3, who would then go on to resolve 80% of those, leaving 80 that fell into dev. And this was a pretty efficient model because you had your less experienced guys at the front, your more experienced guys working on the more complex issues, filtering down and leaving development with only the issues that they really needed to see. But the downside of this was the level of repeat work found at the level 1. A lot of the same issues, questions and problems that would come in time and time again, so that isn't so efficient for that level 1 team. But also, even though it's efficient for dev only to see 80 of these issues, they've completely lost the transparency of actually what exceptions are affecting the customer experience. So customers are experiencing the 10,000 exceptions, with our product development team only seeing 80 of those. They don't actually get to see the other 9,920 exceptions that the customers are having. They don't have any easy visibility to that. So they continue to fix the defects, but realistically won't be improving the product. So they aren't going to reduce the total exceptions and improve the overall customer experience. The idea that if we could actually capture these exceptions, the exceptions that come into the funnel, why don't we document them? And this is what we document in these knowledge base articles that you're seeing represented by the triangles here. So every exception that came into the funnel was documented along with the solution, because firstly that's going to help with the efficiency at the level 1 level where we're getting those repeat questions. But if we've already documented the solution, this will make it really quick for us in level 1 to find that solution and share it with the customers. And also what they were thinking was that if we could actually look at these exceptions in the knowledge base, let's see what types of exceptions we are having. It's really very difficult to analyze every single exception that's coming in via cases. Analyzing 10,000 incidents makes it difficult to come up with some meaningful analysis quickly. quickly. But actually documenting exceptions in a knowledge base is great if you can also consider looking at the knowledge base and analysing as to what types of exceptions we have there, and start pulling together patterns and trends. And so, for example, you might determine that we're seeing lots of exceptions being documented in one area of the product, or perhaps around how to use or configure it. This is great information that we can pass on to dev and say, hey, you know, there are exceptions in this part of the product that maybe we need to look at. Maybe you could improve the product so the customers don't hit these exceptions in the. We can also understand that maybe there's areas of the user experience that we could also improve because we feel customers aren't gaining the right level of competence in certain areas that we could simply address with additional documentation or training. Also, by looking at the trends and patterns in the knowledge base of the exceptions a customer is experiencing, we can also go to improve the product enablement documentation and training. So, if we think about the service organisations and what they were thinking about 25 years ago with regards to a knowledge base, it wasn't about self-service at this point because there was no self-service. This was actually about internal efficiency, improving the product experience, improving documentation, improving training, something that we know we need to do as part of our Support 2.0 initiative. So even back when everyone agreed that this was a good idea, the need for a knowledge base, so everyone agreed and they went out and spent millions on a knowledge-based tool, and the first lesson that the industry think tank learned was that you can spend all the money on one but actually nothing changes. Because you need to get the people to buy into contributing to the knowledge base. Something which we've also seen in Concur is that you can't just roll out a knowledge base, ask people to remember to tick a box when closing a case, and expect overnight there to be tons of great quality knowledge being generated. So the first lesson for knowledge base to be effective is to have the support staff really buy into what's in it for them and really understand why they need to be contributing to the Concur knowledge base. The next sort of problem that they ran into is also one that pretty much every single organisation also runs into when they put their senior people as gatekeepers of the knowledge base, or the ones that are allowed to create the articles in the knowledge base. And again, we've also seen this in Concur. Organisations become so concerned about the quality of content that they only allow their senior people to be the ones to decide what goes into the knowledge base or review what goes into the knowledge base. This is a setup for failure. The reason being is quite simply our most senior guys don't have the bandwidth for this. We have them working on the most complex, time-pressed issues that they don't have time to be generating or reviewing knowledge. And leaving it to specific KB departments to create content also fails, since they often don't have the context. And what we mean by this is that the people that are best positioned to create and document the exception are the people that worked on the exception. So if the issue came in and was solved at level 1, then really that level 1 support person needs to be the one that documents the knowledge, because they understand the context, from understanding the customer's issue and the path that they took to resolution. The story of the case is very difficult to tell if you weren't part of it at the time that it happened, owning that exception and working that exception. So another one of those early lessons that was learnt was that you should never ring-fence knowledge base, nor make certain people the gatekeepers. So remember, everyone in the support organisation needs to contribute to the knowledge base. And this was another one of those pieces that as the different think tank organisations trialled this stuff and came up against these challenges, they worked on them. For example, the concept that you can create support content standards that everyone can follow so that everyone can then contribute to the knowledge base, which is what we want them to do, without detriment to the article quality or consistency. In addition to the content standards for the look and feel of the knowledge base, it was buffered with the KCS licensing model. So whilst we want everyone to contribute, our people need to earn a license to distinguish those that can and cannot publish. Then came the coaching model as well, because we want to be able to continually improve and attain the level that will allow them to publish, so we must create conditions to help them learn. And that is through peer coaching and guidance. But the biggest lesson here was that regardless of the seniority, regardless of their tenure, everyone has the ability to capture the exception. If they're working on the exception with the customer, they have the ability to capture and document and absolutely should be the ones to do so. Now, by the late 90s, some of those think tank organizations started to think about, we've got this knowledge base, it's working really well for us internally, why don't we share it externally? Cue the rise of the self-service and the idea that these exceptions are being documented, why don't we let our customers search and find them themselves? One of the most interesting discoveries that resulted from doing this was that we thought that in support through the funnel, that through direct support with our platform, we see every exception that the customer has. But actually, we discovered that we don't. We're actually only seeing a very small percentage of them, because when these support organizations expose their knowledge base to their customers via self-service, they find that actually that there was 10 times more demand for self-service than there was coming through the funnel. And what we mean by that, and you'll probably think about this for yourself as a consumer, that there are probably issues that you have with the software or hardware that you use every day, exceptions and annoyances, for example, that you wouldn't go as far as logging an IT ticket for or contacting the vendor directly. But if you could search and find a solution yourself, for every one exception that customers want to talk directly to a support analyst about, there's another about 10 exceptions that they would like to resolve as well, if they had access to a knowledge base. So already we can see, just by creating this knowledge base and allowing our customers to search it, you enhance the customer experience, because those issues they're not telling you about, they're going to start resolving them themselves without the interaction of the support staff. As this self-service journey evolved, key factors started to be understood about self-service success. The first factor for success is around findability. There are 3 factors when we are thinking about what makes an article easily findable. The KB content must be in the context of the customer. It must contain the terms and the words for the symptoms that the customer experienced. We know from some of the trouble that customers have had in the past finding articles, it's simply because they don't contain the words that the customer has used to try and find them. It is a technical document, usually written by a very senior developer, which describes the technical problem and the technical solution, whereas customers don't always describe the technical problem. They're describing their context, what they were doing and what happened for them when they experienced the exception. And that's the context that must exist within the knowledge base article to make it findable by customers. Structure is very important. To have a consistent structure really helps with findability and also a rich environment. So we need more than just the symptom of the problem and perhaps the product version. The richer the environment details, such as the part of the product being used, the browser type, the version, the OS system, or the database that was being interacted with at the time, details like this that are included makes the article richer and makes it become more findable. And that's why a knowledge base and a knowledge base article is being created, because it has those items in there. The context is instilled into the article and it has a consistent structure, and we have its sections for the rich environment to go into directly. The second factor is around completeness, and one of the ideals in KCS is that you strive to publish 90% of what you know within 90 minutes of being made aware of it. This moves away from the old days when you would solve a problem and only then start to think about maybe documenting it, and weeks or perhaps months later there would be a knowledge base article that the publishing would be complete. In the KCS world, that 90-90 utopia is that if you could publish 90% of what you know as soon as you know a solution, within 90 minutes get it published to the web, that would positively impact the success through self-service. And there are some organizations out there that are doing this right now very successfully. So part of the case methodology is that you are creating the solution in the moment that it is happening and not after it's been solved. You create it as you experience it, completing it once you know the final solution. The third factor is access. We know that customers will always use the least resistant form of access. So by this, I'm talking about ideally not needing to leave the product at all to log into the support portal to search for an issue resolution. That ability to be able to search from within the platform for a solution while you have all of that context and environment information to hand. However, we don't have this right now. So in its absence, Google indexing knowledge base articles is also a big step to reducing resistance as well and improving access. Customers always strive to find the easiest method to find solutions, and they leverage those methods that present the least amount of effort. So the more access you give them through the product or via Google, and the less effort they need to go to find resolutions, the more that they will use what we make available and the more successful they'll be. The fourth factor is navigation. Customers dislike dead ends, and this means that if they are searching down a particular route and that route fails to deliver a resolution or something that they were looking for, customers don't want to have to then start all over again. This is really essential when they're coming through an assisted channel. In terms of creating an effortless experience, it's really important that search sessions that have been executed at the self-service level are captured and attached to the case at the point that they reach out to us for assistance. And they should be made available to the analyst, who can then see the search strings previously used and any articles and content that has been viewed and discarded prior to the case being logged. This enriches the experience with the analyst because it reduces repetition, speeds up diagnosis, and aids in understanding the customer's context. It also helps because if an existing knowledge base article is discovered that addresses the issue, or we have to create a new one, there is a knowledge about what the customer was using to search that can be added to that article or used in the construction of that new one to reduce the chance that it will be missed in future searches. We also need to consider another method of finding. Customers don't just search. 40% of the knowledge customers consume via navigation. They want to navigate. Perhaps the circumstances are that they're being a bit more proactive. I'm about to embark on something. I'm about to do an upgrade. I'm about to use this part of the product. I want to navigate. I want to see some best practice documentation. I want to see top 10 KB articles or wikis for this area because I want to know. Perhaps I just want to be more prepared in advance. 60% is around searching. Now I'm searching. I have a particular question or a problem. And that's why it's important that we've got within our knowledge management strategy both documentation/wikis and KB articles. KB articles are set up to address the first factor on findability. They're very much set up for the search side. They are one problem or question written in the context of the customer with the structure in a rich environment, whereas documentation and wikis are very much set up for navigation, using a structured tree of content that narrows down, addressing questions like, I want to navigate this around this product, I want to see best practice. This isn't about a question of whether we should use wikis or documentation. We need to ensure we're leveraging them all to address all aspects of the enablement experience. We all have to understand how customers will come to this knowledge. Are they searching? If they are, so they're probably looking for content in the KB. Are they navigating? If so, they're probably looking for content that's in wikis or docs. The final factor is around marketing, and the old Field of Dreams adage of if you build it they will come simply doesn't work, and we all know that the only way that you can get customers to see the value in something new is by pointing them to it and making them see that value and helping them learn. So we need to educate the customer and remember that they can go there again another time. So back to the industry think tank who has scoped all this out. What they found is that when you follow all these factors, it was very successful, preventing exceptions from coming into the funnel. They found up to 50% of those exceptions customers can solve themselves, so avoided the assisted support channel altogether at this point. We're now only looking at 5,000 assisted support sessions. And this really only affected the level 1 because if you think about the issues that fall into level 2, they're always the more complex and the more complex new or unique issues, and they won't have gone away. The ones that were eliminated straight away were those known repeat issues that customers are now able to find themselves. What was also discovered is that those traditional metrics for measuring support needed to change. How long did it take to solve the issue? How quickly and how often on a first call was there a resolution? What's our customer satisfaction? What's the cost per incident? These needed to change because the number of assisted cases being logged was coupled with the fact that easy, quick to answer questions were being eliminated via self-service, and meaning that as the time to resolve goes up, which is the wrong direction because you're always classically wanting that to reduce, it now takes longer in the time because on average each of the assisted cases that do reach us we need to spend longer on because they're the exceptional ones, the ones that weren't accounted for via self-service. The same for first call resolution. It goes down and gets worse because, again, those easier ones that we could bat away pretty quickly are no longer coming in. Even things like CSAT go down because, again, those quick and easy ones that you're able to resolve to delight the customer with are gone. And what's left is the more complex ones, the ones that we need to learn about, the ones that we need to take longer to resolve. And we're forwarding a more of a percentage to the level 2s and level 3s. So this affects CSAT, and it also affects the cost per incident because it takes more time to solve each case. So what was learnt here is that you can't just rely on the old measures at this stage. You can't just measure what happens, what you see in the funnel. You need to find a way to measure the overall value that you're contributing, not just in the funnel, but also the impact that self-service is having. And that's also why the measures really needed to change. As we expand out the model, the third element is really around customers wanting to talk and help each other with their exceptions. And this is obviously where the idea of communities came about. This is where customers via forums want to talk to each other about their exceptions or look at things like wikis, etc. together. The interesting finding here was that, if we're again seeing only 1 times the issues coming into the funnel, 10 times were the exceptions that customers were self-serving, actually what was found was that around 30 to 100 times the exceptions that customers wanted to talk to each other about were residing here. So it's about not seeing all exceptions that customers have in the funnel directly with support and looking outside of that model. There are lots of exceptions out there that customers experience and of course want to get rid of, but some of them they just want to talk to each other about. Some they want to self-service on. Some they want to come in directly to us. And that's why, if you think about it, going back to that original 10,000 exceptions coming into the funnel figure, there are 100,000 exceptions that customers would like to resolve themselves. There are then 300 to 1 million exceptions that customers would prefer to talk to each other about. And if you think about what actually the funnel directly with support is just a very small 1 to 2% of the actual exceptions that customers are experiencing every day. By joining this together, by having that knowledge base that really allows customers to solve the exceptions that they weren't telling us about, this is the concept of how KCS came about, where we don't try and predict the value of the solution. We don't try and think, well, actually, maybe I'll only see this one or 2 times in the funnel, or maybe it's not worth creating an article about this or try and document it because we'll never see it again. Instead, everyone is documenting all the exceptions and letting the customers decide actually which exceptions are the ones that they would like to tell us about, which they prefer to solve themselves, and which they want to discuss between themselves. And there is definitely links between the community and the knowledge base. So again, they're looking at the exceptions that the customers are talking about a lot within the communities, which then turn into these threads. Then you can start looking at figures around most viewed or the most likes, and that's also really rich information that you can take and either turn into knowledge base article, collateral, additional value material, or vice versa. If there are knowledge base articles in certain areas that you would think could really be enhanced by becoming part of a larger wiki or a piece of documentation or training, then this is where you can build that business case by looking in the community and monitoring its value there. So I hope that this demonstration has equipped you with an understanding and basis for the KEY program to take back and reinforce with your teams. I hope that you have found it useful to learn about the model that we are rolling out, and it has helped you understand how KCS evolved over the last 25 years, and also why Concur have chosen it as their model. Hopefully another key takeaway is that it's not just about self-service or writing KB articles. It actually started around internal efficiencies, product improvement, and improving the user experience. This is the reason that Concur program is called Program Key. It's made up of 2 elements, KCS, the knowledge, and SSS, self-service success. And if you think about our Support 2.0 transformation, if we get KCS right, if we put the knowledge base at the center of what we do, if we really document every exception that the customer comes to us about and we don't pick and choose, we can put into practice the lessons that the support industry have learned over the 25 years. We document all exceptions and monitor the demand and reuse that knowledge base, and that will help us be successful successful in all of our next generation activities, which will really help us deliver best in breed platform, services, and support.